Hello dear friends, this is your personal English coach Divyam here, and today we're going to study the poem The Patriot, written by a renowned English poet and playwright Robert Browning. Robert Browning is well known for his dramatic monologues and is widely celebrated as one of the foremost poets of the Victorian era. In this poem, Browning talks about politics, patriotism, religious faith, and harsh reality of leaders who are true to their sense of patriotism. It speaks about the sacrifice of such leaders who are misunderstood by the people. The speaker of the poem is a patriot. The poem is a monologue of this patriotic speaker who narrates his tale to us as he has been taken to the scaffold to be executed publicly for his misdeeds. He tells us of his situation, how he was once well loved by everyone and how he is now despised by the same people. The patriot is innocent of having done any misdeeds, and it is only out of the misunderstanding of the people that he is being put to death. His death sentence is for the wrong reason, and although he's tried to persuade the people to listen to him, it has done him no good. The Patriot is a harsh critic on public sentiment and morality. It stresses on the point that not all decisions made or supported by the people are right decisions, or even in their own interest. The poem has a sense of universality to it, as history has witnessed the rise and fall of many such patriots throughout its course. This is a grim reminder that life is really uncertain. Having known a little bit about the poem and the poet, let's jump right into the poem. Let's talk about the first stanza. It was roses, roses all the way, with myrtle mixed in my path like mad. The house roofs seemed to heave and sway. The church spires flamed, such flags they had, a year ago on this very day. What is the meaning of this stanza? The poem starts with the patriot describing an event, a grand public welcome that took place a year ago on the very same day. He is reminiscing the past, and he builds a picture for us as he remembers that day. His walking path was covered with lots and lots of rose petals with myrtle mixed in them. The path was festooned with these flowers for him. People standing on the roofs of their houses cheered for him as he passed by. They were overjoyed to see him. The spires of church, pointed tapering roofs where we generally see on old cathedrals and similar buildings, were covered with flaming flags that people had put up for celebration. People were overwhelmingly delighted to greet the hero and were enthusiastic to see him as he passed. The crowd is overwhelmingly happy and cheerful. It is only logical to assume that this grand celebration must be as a result of some achievement on the speaker's part. Perhaps it was a victory in war, or the assemblage of a fighting one, or winning a popular election to an office, or being nominated as a local ruler, or maybe something else. It can be assumed at this point in the poem that it concerned the common people highly, and they were happy on the occasion. The patriot is seen as public hero in this stanza, who is greeted with much love and affection by the commoners. Moving on to the next stanza. The air broke into a mist with bells. The old walls rocked with the crowd and cries. Had I said, good folk, mere noise repels, but give me your son from yonder skies? They had answered, and afterward, what else? What is the meaning of the second stanza? In this stanza, the speaker continues narrating the old story from the same day a year ago. He describes the events to the readers. People were rejoicing by ringing bells, and the entire atmosphere was thick with its noise. They were standing on some kind of old structure and cheering for the patriot with their cries rocking the walls. Now the Patriot says, had he asked the public for anything, even the dearest things on which their sustenance depends, they would have readily given it to him. Such great was his image. They would then ask him what else he wanted. We can see the exuberance of the people at the sight of the poet. The poet is trying to establish the kind of popularity the speaker had through the stanza. Moving on to the next one. Alack, it was I who leaped at the sun, to give it my loving friends to keep. Not man could do, have I left undone, and you see my harvest, what I reap. This very day, now, a year is run. The third stanza of the poem is the speaker's discourse on what all he did for his country. It begins with the poet giving a subtle reference to the old Greek mythological tale of Icarus and Daedalus. Icarus was the son of the great inventor Daedalus, and the story revolves around the escape of these two men from the high tower where they were held prisoners by making wings out of a bird feather and wax. Icarus, taken aback with the ability of flight, flies too close to the sun, which causes the wax in his wings melt and eventual fall, which kills him. Just like Icarus, the speaker admits that he too was overly ambitious and leaped at the sun. Giving the sun his loving friends to keep may suggest that his action somehow caused the death of his close friends. Here again, we can hypothesize that the Patriot is talking about some battle that claimed the lives of his dear ones. He did everything a man could have done to make things right. Despite this, he is facing his undeserved end. He calls to attention the miserable state he is in. The term harvest and reap are closely seen as common metaphors for karma, and the poet uses this to convey that what he was facing is not what he truly deserves. He says it has been a year since that day. Here, the poet ends the speaker's flashback. Let's go to the fourth stanza. There's nobody on the housetops now, just a palsied, or we can say palsied, which means someone who has paralysis. Just a palsied view at the window set, for the best of the sight is all allowed at the shambles gate, or better yet by the scaffold's very foot, I trow. The speaker returns to the present and talks about what he sees. He describes the present setting and in a way contrasts it with the one on the same day a year ago. Now he has been convicted and is being led to the gallows to be put to death. As opposed to the setting in the first stanza, now the place is all empty. Now there's nobody on the rooftops cheering him. Only old men who are taken down by palsy, which is a disease, and unable to cross the threshold of their houses, are watching the Patriot as he marches down his death. The reason why no one is there to see the speaker is because people have gathered at the shambles gate, the gate of gallows, to see him die. The people want to be where the action is. The speaker further makes the heart-touching comment that best sight is at the gate of the slaughterhouse or at the very foot of the scaffold. Moving on to the fifth stanza. I go in rain and more than needs. A rope cuts my wrists behind, and I think by the feel of my forehead bleeds, for they fling, whoever has a mind, stones at me for my year's misdeeds. Let's try and understand the meaning of fifth stanza. The fifth stanza is a continuation of the previous one and further describes the speaker's humiliation at the hands of the people. The poet starts with filling up the setting even more. It is raining as the speaker is walking towards the scaffold. His hands are tied behind a by a tight rope, so tight that it cuts his wrists. He has now arrived closer to the shambles gate, where all the people are gathered. The patriot is in his own mind knowing the steadfast certainty of death ahead of him. As he is walking, he thinks he is bleeding from his forehead. He can only feel the trickling of blood. People throwing stones at him are causing the injuries, so stones have replaced the petal of roses. He says that people who are throwing stones are the ones who have an active mind and are aware of his misdeeds. The speaker don't seem to be angry with these people for throwing stones at him. It suggests that despite the treatment he is receiving, he doesn't blame the people. He knows that they have misunderstood him. And finally, the last stanza. Thus I entered, and thus I go. In triumphs, people have dropped down dead. In quotes, paid by the world, what dost thou owe me? God might question, now instead, this God shall repay, I am safer so. The last stanza of the poem reflects on the patriot's death. It is full of philosophical and religious ideas. Thus I entered, and thus I go. His entry and exit from life, position, and people's mind in the presence of so many others sums up the speaker's life well. He says that in his triumphs, people have dropped him down dead. This suggests that he looks at his predicament as a triumph. He believes that he stood by the right things and thus considers himself victorious in defeat. The final 3 lines of the stanza deal with the ideas of the speaker. Yet again, we see Browning's stout religious belief. He believes that God might say, in quotes, your sins were already washed away when you died. The people sought to it. They punished you. What now do you expect from me? You are now free of all corruption. Quotes complete. Thus, the patriot thinks that the punishment he got in the mortal world has purged him and that he hopes to go to heaven instead of hell. He feels safer knowing that God knows he stood for what he thought was right and thus he will be safe under him. Let's try and conclude this poem. So, as you saw, there are 6 stanzas in the poem. And as a conclusive note, we must remember that it is not possible to establish the gullibility or innocence of the patriot in the poem. On one hand, we see that the speaker himself is admitting that he did some misdeeds, whilst on the other hand, we see him as a patriot who is mistaken. At least the title suggests that. It might be so that he is guilty of some things he did which he thought were right. It might even be so that he is truly innocent and is simply put to death because the people wish so. However, the poem ends with a note of optimism with Browning's own philosophy. In quotes, God's in his heaven and all's right with the world. Quotes complete. The patriot believes that it is God who will reward him according to his true merit. On closing note, the poem resembles to Browning's another poem. If you've come across, the poem is known as The Last Ride Together. So friend, this video was recorded on demand by some of my students. I have another version of the same poem in Hindi if you like it. I hope you've understood the poem, and if you did, do like, do comment and give your feedback, and most importantly, subscribe to my channel so that you get the latest updates of my video tutorials. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.